Over the last couple of years, I've been publishing my Project Management in Under 5 video series almost weekly. There are over 80 videos in which I explain one key project management term. And I thought it would be interesting to look back over the last few years and find out which of those videos are most popular. I've obviously had to take into account that some have been published more recently and therefore have necessarily had fewer views. But in this video, I'd like to review the top 12 project management jargon terms. In at number 12 is the Gantt Chart, and I'd probably expect this to come somewhat higher. The Gantt Chart is, after all, something of a poster child for project management. People who don't know anything about project management immediately see a Gantt chart and think that this is what project management is. So, what is a Gantt chart? Well, it's a simple chart that illustrates the scheduling of activities on a project. Down the side, we list all the activities that we need to do, and across the length of the chart, we schedule out the time over which the project takes place, with equal divisions of time representing equal amounts of time. And each activity is represented by a bar, and the length of the bar represents the duration of the task, and the positioning of the bar represents when we're scheduling that task. And that's pretty much all you need to know about a Gantt chart, with perhaps the exception that you can indicate different milestones with symbols. You can colour in or shade or block out parts of the bar to represent a measure of how much work has been done. And of course, you can draw a vertical line through your chart to represent now. At number 11 is PMO, the project, the program, or the portfolio management office. The PMO is a function within an organization which supports projects, programs, or portfolios, depending on the scale of the organization and the ambition of its PMO. A project management office will provide services to the projects, the project managers, and the project teams. Often, it provides some form of collation of reports so that the organisation gets a strategic overview of what's happening in multiple projects. But it can also provide services like governance support, like disseminating good practice, perhaps even creating project processes. And of course, it can provide training, it can provide mentorship for project managers and project team members. There's a whole range of functions that a PMO can provide. So take a look at our video to find out more. We're into the top 10 with the iron triangle. Again, this is another term that I expected to be somewhat higher up. The iron triangle, the time, cost, quality triangle, the triple constraint, the triangular balance, represents the three most important components of a project. Its objectives, the time within which the project must be completed, the cost or the budget which you have to complete the project, and the quality, the standards to which the project must be delivered. In the US, the iron triangle often refers to time, cost, and scope. In the UK, more often to quality. But I'm going to argue strongly that quality is a more useful corner to the triple constraint, because you can vary scope to match your budget, to match your time constraints, and to match the quality constraints that you have. Next, at number 9, we have milestone planning. Milestones are key points, key moments in your project when you either complete something or you have to make a key decision. And therefore, milestone planning is an early stage planning activity where you set out all of the key points in your project and you array them in a logical sequence. Some things will happen in parallel to others, and so you can develop a milestone plan. And then, if you are resource constrained, you can then figure out how long it will take to move from one milestone to the next. If, on the other hand, you are on a deadline-driven project, where you know where now is and you know where the completion of your project lies, You can then figure out what resources you need to bridge between one milestone and the next. So milestone planning is a great way to create a project plan. For large projects, it's often a starting point. For small projects, a milestone plan is often the only plan you'll need. Number 8 is project governance. Governance is an unloved subject, I found, particularly in live training environments. However, I'm pleased to see it at such a high position in our top 10. And that means that people are interested in it. So project governance is all the things that make sure the project gets done properly. And there are 3 principal governance functions. First, it's setting the strategic direction of the project. Secondly, it's making sure that decisions are made in an accountable fashion throughout the project lifecycle. And thirdly, it's overseeing the project to make sure it delivers as it is supposed to and it fits within the policies and the procedures that the organisation mandates. There are a lot of different governance mechanisms. There are different roles within the project, like the sponsor and the project board or a steering group, that are creatures of governance. But governance is making sure the project gets done right. It's about steering the project to success. Number 7 is the RACI Chart. RACI. A RACI chart is a simple tool for understanding the allocation of resources of people to your project. For each task, you can allocate people into one of 4 roles in a classic RACI chart, either responsible for delivering that task. This is the principal person who is involved in making the task happen, but you can also list the supporting team as well. Then there is the authority, sometimes labelled as accountable, but I prefer the word authority, to sign off the task as properly complete. This may be a quality review role, or it may be a leadership role. C is for consult, and these are the individuals that the team will need to consult to make sure it delivers the task properly. So you can think of this as consultants on the one hand who have expertise to contribute, or on the other hand as stakeholders whose opinions are important. And finally, I for inform, the people who need to know what is going on. So you need to make sure you inform them, keep them up to date on progress. Their opinions are of lesser importance to getting this aspect of the project right, and therefore you don't actively need to consult them. But remember, good stakeholder engagement means being prepared to listen at all times. Number 6 is the work breakdown structure, the WBS. It's a tool that isn't used as much as it should be on projects. In my experience, people often jump straight to the Gantt chart. But the work breakdown structure is the simple way of understanding everything that you need to do on a project. And rather like the iron triangle, there is a difference that separates UK and European project managers and US and North American project managers. The Atlantic is big. In the UK and in Europe, largely the work breakdown structure breaks down the work that needs to be done. It is a decomposition of the project tasks. Each task at the bottom, of course, will produce a product or will contribute to producing a product. But the work breakdown structure in the UK is about breaking down the tasks of the project. And of course, once you get to the bottom level, you've got an articulation of the scope of the project, which you can then use as the basis for creating either your network chart or your Gantt chart. In the US, however, a work breakdown structure breaks down the products that the project produces. Therefore, we start with the entire project, the completed deliverable set, and we break it down into components. Both methods are equally valid, although, being British, I'd argue that if you're going to call it a work breakdown structure, you should break down the work. What the Americans call a work breakdown structure, in the UK, we call a product breakdown structure. However, my top tip is either stick to activities and tasks on the one hand, or to products or deliverables on the other. Do not mix the two within one breakdown structure. We're up to the top 5, and in at number 5 is Kanban, or Kanban, I think is the correct pronunciation. And Kanban is a project methodology ideally suited to projectizing a regular sequence of necessary pieces of work. So, for example, if you're an IT department and you are constantly being called upon to make fixes, changes, additions to functionality, then each piece of work enters a list on your Kanban chart of things that need to get done, and it then moves into the next stage of being drawn down for active consideration, for planning, for design work, and then it might move to the next column where it is in active development, and then to another column for testing, and then finally for sign-off. And so for a project environment where you have multiple pieces of work, a team with a fixed capacity can draw a certain amount of that work into each stage of the project lifecycle and move it forward. Kanban comes from Japanese industry, and it's a very powerful tool, often associated with agile project management because of its flexibility, but it is a methodology in itself and a hugely valuable one to know about. Number 4 is Stakeholder Management, and I confess, I called the video Stakeholder Management because I knew that that's what people would be looking for, but for me, this is all about engaging with stakeholders in a positive, constructive and respectful manner. So I prefer the term stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement is all about finding out who your stakeholders are, what they want, what their opinions are, what their points of view are, and yes, engaging with them to try to influence those points of view and to get the best out of those stakeholders, to draw their knowledge from them. And the process of stakeholder engagement does, of course, need to be managed. So you could call it stakeholder management, but I prefer stakeholder engagement management. We're at the top 3 now, and number 3 is the PERT chart. PERT stands for Program Evaluation and Review Technique, and a PERT chart is a form of network chart. It's a form of network chart where the activities are indicated by arrows, and the connections, the junctions, the linkages between activities are nodes that join the arrows together. And the duration for each activity is estimated from a 3-point estimate. PERT charts are not as popular these days as their cousin, the critical path method. The critical path method is very similar, but the differences have made it a little bit more popular. And guess what? At number 2 is the critical path method. And the critical path method is a network diagram. It's a way of creating a project schedule or program as a network. But in the critical path method, each activity is represented by a box with key data in it, and the linkages between those activities are indicated by arrows. And the critical path method network diagram is going to be familiar to many project managers. And of course, I made the point that PERT method uses 3-point estimates for activities. Critical path method keeps it simple. It has single-point estimates, which are not as good, but often users of the PERT method make very poor 3-point estimates using a simple formula for every single one, and therefore they are no more valid than our single-point critical path method estimates. The critical path method is a great way for understanding slack in your project and risk in your project. And every project manager should know how to create a network chart using the critical path method. So what is number 1? What is the single top most important, arguably, certainly most popularly searched project management jargon term? And the answer is scope. Scope is the breadth and the depth of your ambition for your project. It's how much you want to do. And the breadth represents all the things you want to get done, and the depth represents the detail, the extent to which you want to do each of those things. And the simplest way to illustrate scope is with a circle. Everything inside that circle is within the scope of your project. It's the things you need to do. It's the products or services or deliverables you need to create. Everything outside that circle is out of scope, often referred to as exclusions. You don't need to do those things. There's no budget for it, there's no time for it, there's no resources for it. It's either not important enough for the project to take it on, or it's important enough for the organization to do, but for whatever reason, it's been allocated to another project. So there you have it, the top 12 project management jargon terms. I hope you've enjoyed hearing about them. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do give us a like. Please subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to learn of new videos as soon as they drop.